There's one day on every retreat I run that make people slightly nervous because they've never experienced silence before. It's actually not the early mornings that they worry about, not the physical work, the day we don't speak at all. That day is called Mauna. It's actually a Sanskrit word for silence. And every time I watch, the same thing happens. The night before, there's a particular kind of nervousness in the room, not about the quiet itself, but what happens when the requirement to check in on each other, to keep things pleasant, to manage the room, that actually gets taken away for a whole day. Here's who tends to find this the hardest, the women I work with. They have mostly spent decades being the one who holds things together. They run households, they run teams. Sometimes they run them both at once. They're fluent in reading the room and adjusting themselves to just fit in. What they're not fluent in is being in a room where nothing is required of them. So the first few hours of the Mauna day feel actually just a little bit awkward. Most people aren't used to not talking, not chatting, not filling the silence. There's a restlessness in that. Some people feel an urge to check in on someone else, but they don't need to, and that feels really odd to them. There's often a guilt of not being useful, and sometimes a low-grade grief surfaces once there's nothing left to distract them from it. By the afternoon, something shifts. Not for everyone at the same point, but for most people, what replaces the tension actually isn't boredom, it's the relief of realising how much of an ordinary day, of our ordinary day, goes towards managing everyone else's life, managing everything else. There was a study done and they found that short pauses of silence between passages of music actually lowered the heart rate, the blood pressure, and the breathing, not just back to normal, but to below normal. The pause did more regulatory work than the music did, which is incredible because usually you find when you put a piece of music on, it transports you somewhere. It either winds you up or winds you down. But this was completely different. The pause did so much more of the work. The chronic compensation, the constant low-grade effort of managing other people keeps the system mildly but continuously switched on. We don't really realise that. The nervous system doesn't know the difference between the actual crisis and the effort of like 30 years of being the reliable one. The silence actually is the only reliable instruction it follows to come back down. The most useful hours on the retreat are usually the most uncomfortable ones. It's one of the cleanest ways to show someone exactly what they've been carrying, the version their system has been running without their permission. By the end of the day, no one's really talking about how quiet it was. They're actually talking about how loud everything else is. If this resonates with you, there's a 5-minute quiz linked to below the video. You'll find it somewhere. It's called the Inner Stability Quiz. It won't score you or grade your sleep. It'll tell you what your system is actually doing. It's worth 5 minutes if any of this sounded familiar.